For decades, fans of Curly Howard believed they understood what happened to the most explosive member of the Three Stooges. The story seemed simple: health problems, a few strokes, and a tragic early death. But the truth is far more complicated and far more heartbreaking. Behind the laughter, something much darker was unfolding on the very sets that made Curly famous. Warning signs appeared years before anyone realized how serious things had become. And when the full picture finally emerged, it raised a troubling question. Was Curly's downfall simply fate? Or was it something that could have been prevented? Curly's strange road to fame. Curly Howard is the stooge most people instantly recognize, the one with the shaved head and the wild expressions. Moe once joked that he looked like a dirty tennis ball, but behind the jokes was a performer who many fans considered the true creative engine of the group. His improvisations were brilliant, his physical comedy unforgettable, and his catchphrases, especially the famous "Nook Nook Nook" and "Woo Woo Woo," became part of American pop culture. Long before the world knew him as Curly, though, he was Jerome Lester Horwitz. Jerome was born on October 22, 1903, in Bath Beach, a lively summer resort area in Brooklyn. His parents, Jenny and Solomon Horwitz, were already busy raising 4 boys when Jerome arrived as the youngest of the family. He weighed in at a healthy 8.5 pounds and quickly became the baby of the household in every sense of the word. The circumstances of his birth even had a small, almost comical coincidence attached to them. The doctor who delivered him, a man named Dr. Duffy, happened to be the brother of Moe Howard's 6th grade teacher. It was one of those strange little connections that seemed to follow the Horwitz family around. At home, Jerome rarely heard the name Curly. His family called him Jerome, while Moe had a nickname he preferred even more: Babe. To Moe, his youngest brother would always be Babe, no matter how famous he eventually became. But for a while, it looked like that fame might never happen. When Jerome was about 12 years old, a frightening accident nearly ended his future before it even began. One afternoon, he was out hunting with a friend and decided to clean Moe's .22 rifle. Somewhere during the process, the gun discharged. In an instant, Jerome saw blood pouring from his left leg. The young boy went into shock almost immediately. It was the kind of moment that freezes time. 1 second everything is normal, and the next second nothing is. Thankfully, the bullet missed anything life-threatening, but it did leave serious damage in the bones of his foot. Doctors recommended surgery to repair it, yet Jerome refused the operation. That decision stayed with him for the rest of his life. Because the injury never fully healed, Jerome developed an unusual, awkward walk. What might have been a lifelong burden eventually became one of his most recognizable comedic traits. That strange, bouncing strut later appeared again and again in Three Stooges shorts, turning a childhood tragedy into a signature part of Curly's physical comedy. As a boy, Jerome was very different from the character audiences would later see on screen. Surprisingly, he was the quiet one in the family. He rarely caused trouble for his parents. His older brothers, Moe and Shemp, were the ones constantly stirring up chaos. Moe later told a story from those early days that perfectly captured the kind of trouble they got into. When Jerome was still just a baby, Moe and Shemp decided his brand new baby carriage could serve a better purpose. They ripped the wheels off, attached a pair of 2x4s, and turned it into a homemade soapbox racer. Then they placed baby Jerome inside and dragged the contraption all over town. Looking back years later, Moe admitted it was a miracle nothing worse happened. When their parents finally discovered what the boys had done, the punishment was swift and memorable. By the time Jerome reached 4 years old, Moe and Shemp had already made an unusual prediction. Their little brother was going to be a comedian. The 2 older boys loved putting on small performances in friends' basements, staging homemade theater productions for neighborhood kids. They even charged admission, 2 cents a ticket. Of course, once the earnings were divided between the 3 brothers, there was hardly anything left. But the point wasn't the money. Those tiny basement shows gave Jerome his first taste of performing in front of an audience. It planted a seed. School, however, never became Jerome's strong suit. According to Moe, he was a fair student at best and rarely stood out in the classroom. But outside of school, he showed plenty of talent. A childhood friend named Lester Friedman later remembered Jerome as an excellent athlete who made a name for himself playing basketball for his elementary school team. Still, Jerome never finished school. Instead, he drifted between small jobs while staying close to his older brothers. Wherever Mo and Shemp went, Jerome often followed. During his late teens, he discovered something that truly excited him: the music and dance scene around Brooklyn. Jerome loved dancing, and he turned out to be surprisingly skilled at it. He became a regular at the Triangle Ballroom, one of the popular dance spots in the area. At the time, another young dancer was also passing through those same floors, George Raft, who would later become a Hollywood movie star. Long before the fame, Raft was simply another talented ballroom dancer working the circuit. Jerome's talents weren't limited to dancing. He picked up the ukulele and enjoyed singing while he played. Mo once described him perfectly. He might not have been a great student, but socially he was always in demand thanks to his warm personality and his beautiful singing voice. Even as Jerome found his own interests, Mo kept trying to guide him toward the stage. He often took his younger brother to vaudeville shows and melodramas, hoping Jerome would absorb something from the experience. But Jerome wasn't drawn to the dramatic performances. His attention always drifted toward musicals and comedy. Around this same time, while still in his late teens, Jerome fell in love and rushed into marriage. Strangely, the identity of the young woman remains a mystery even today. Historians still don't know her name. What is known is that Jerome's mother strongly disapproved of the match. Jenny Horwitz ruled the household with a firm hand, and she believed her youngest son was far too young to be married. Within 6 months, she stepped in and had the marriage annulled. Life moved on quickly after that. By 1928, Jerome landed a job that finally placed him on stage. He began working as a comedy musical conductor for the Orville Knapp Band. It was technically his first professional stage experience. But Jerome didn't simply stand in front of the orchestra and wave a baton. According to Mo, he turned the entire act into a comedic routine. Jerome would walk onto the stage wearing a special breakaway tuxedo and begin conducting with exaggerated enthusiasm. As he swung the baton wildly, pieces of the suit would begin falling off one by one until the audience was in stitches. Even then, he had a natural instinct for getting laughs. While Jerome experimented with small performances like this, his brothers Mo and Shemp were building a reputation of their own. They had started appearing as comic sidekicks in the vaudeville act of Ted Healy. Healy eventually began referring to them as his Stooges, a nickname that stuck. Exactly how the group first formed is still debated by historians. Some accounts say Mo joined first, others credit Shemp. One popular story claims the whole thing happened by accident. During a performance one night, Mo spotted Shemp sitting in the audience. The two brothers began jokingly shouting insults back and forth across the theater. The crowd loved it. Ted Healy loved it even more and reportedly hired Shemp on the spot to join the act permanently. Before long, the group began to grow. The next addition was Larry Fine, though his background was nothing like the slapstick comedy people would later associate with him. Larry was actually a serious violinist and a trained dancer. Comedy had never been part of his plan, but Mo and the others believed he had something special. Eventually, they convinced him to give it a try. One thing about Larry immediately stood out: his unforgettable hairstyle. Bald on top with wild curls exploding out from the sides, it looked almost too strange to be real. The look, however, was completely accidental. The story goes that Ted Healy first saw Larry's hair while visiting his dressing room backstage. Larry had just washed it, and as it dried naturally, the curls puffed out in every direction. Healy thought the sight was hilarious and insisted Larry keep the style exactly as it was. It turned out to be a brilliant instinct. That hairstyle would become one of the most recognizable looks in comedy history. For Larry, joining the Stooges was more than just a career change. It was an escape. As a traveling musician before meeting the group, he had often performed in small towns where he faced discrimination for being Jewish. Some experiences were humiliating. On one occasion, an anti-Semitic stage manager refused to let Larry use his dressing room and forced him to prepare for the show in a bathroom instead. Those days, thankfully, would soon be behind him. Interestingly, the act wasn't originally meant to be a trio at all. In the beginning, the lineup included Moe Howard, Shemp Howard, Larry Fine, and a fourth performer named Fred Sanborn. Even then, they weren't the stars of the show. Their role was simply to support Ted Healy's main act. But something unexpected happened. The Stooges began stealing the spotlight. Audiences loved their chaotic energy and physical comedy so much that they often overshadowed Healy himself. Eventually, Moe, Shemp, and Larry decided to leave Healy's act and strike out on their own. At first, they experimented with different identities, trying names like the Three Lost Souls and the Southern Gentleman. Neither name quite captured their style. Before long, Ted Healy reappeared with an offer that was hard to refuse. He had secured a role in a Broadway revue and wanted the group back. The opportunity seemed too big to ignore, so they reunited with him. But the partnership quickly fell apart again. Between constant contract disputes and Healy's increasingly heavy drinking, tensions reached a breaking point. Finally, Shemp exploded in anger and walked away from the act entirely. The departure left a massive gap in the group. Suddenly, there was a missing stooge, and the show still had to go on. The very next day, Moe had an idea. His younger brother Jerome had always been hovering around backstage, eager to be part of the world of show business. Joe Besser, who worked with the troupe in The Passing Show of 1932, later remembered Jerome as a familiar face behind the scenes, running errands, grabbing sandwiches, and helping wherever he could. At that point, Jerome wasn't part of the act at all. He was simply a devoted younger brother who loved watching the performances. But now, there was an opportunity. When Moe suggested Jerome as Shemp's replacement, Jerome didn't hesitate for a second. Determined to prove he could fit the role, he shaved off his thick hair and even removed his mustache before anyone asked him to. He was ready. Many people today assume Curly was part of the original Three Stooges lineup, largely because the famous Columbia Pictures shorts featured the trio of Moe, Larry, and Curly. In reality, Shemp had been the original third stooge, and Curly stepped in later. That piece of trivia often surprises fans, and as history would eventually reveal, the story behind that change would lead the group into one of the darkest chapters of its existence. But at that moment, none of that had happened yet. All that mattered was Moe's bold suggestion to bring his younger brother into the act. And when Ted Healy first heard the idea, his reaction was anything but enthusiastic. The young man standing in front of him looked nothing like the bald, wide-eyed stooge audiences would eventually adore. Curly had a full head of thick, wavy red hair and wore a large handlebar mustache. To Healy, he looked more like a romantic lead than a clown. Healy didn't sugarcoat his reaction. After looking Curly over, he bluntly told Moe that the kid simply didn't look funny. For a moment, it seemed like that might be the end of the audition, but Curly had other ideas. Instead of arguing, he quietly stepped out of the room. A short time later, he returned, and this time, his entire head had been shaved completely bald. The transformation was instant and dramatic. Suddenly, the serious-looking young man had turned into something much closer to the ridiculous character that would later make audiences laugh for decades. That bold move did the trick. Healy was impressed enough to give Curly a chance. Years later, Curly would remember the moment with a mixture of humor and disbelief. Before that meeting, he had been proud of his wavy hair and carefully groomed mustache. But when Healy asked what he could do on stage, Jerome admitted he wasn't entirely sure. Healy's response was simple: start by getting rid of the hair. Soon afterward, the mustache disappeared as well. A comedy legend had just been born, though no one realized it yet. Curly Howard's hidden struggles. In those early days with the act, the performers began developing the brand of physical comedy that would later define the Three Stooges. Eye pokes, slaps, ear twists, and head bonks became routine parts of the show. On screen, it looked brutal, as if Moe was constantly beating the daylights out of his partners. In reality, none of it was real. Moe was incredibly precise and careful with every move. The blows were choreographed down to fractions of a second. Angles, timing, and sleight of hand created the illusion of violence while keeping everyone safe. It was less about aggression and more about perfect stagecraft. By the time the 1930s arrived, the Stooges were beginning to find their rhythm. They had appeared in films before, but their partnership with Columbia Pictures would eventually define the peak of their career. Their first short film for the studio arrived in 1934. It was called Woman Haters, and it stood apart from most of the shorts that would follow. The film was produced as part of a musical novelty series, which meant the entire script was delivered in rhyme with a jazzy rhythm. Even Curly's screen credit looked different. Instead of Curly Howard, he was listed as Jerry Howard. Columbia executives quickly realized they had something special on their hands. The studio offered the trio a 7-year contract worth $60,000 a year. At the time, it was an impressive salary, equivalent to well over $1 million annually in modern terms. From 1934 through 1946, the Stooges produced an astonishing 97 short films for Columbia. But despite their growing success on screen, they never abandoned their roots in live performance. Between filming schedules, the trio traveled constantly, performing in theaters across the country. Some years they spent as many as 20 weeks on the road, drawing huge crowds who wanted to see the chaotic comedy in person. Among the three performers, Curly quickly emerged as the breakout star. His unpredictable energy, strange noises, and exaggerated movements turned him into a national favorite. Audiences couldn't get enough of him. Ironically, that same fame began to create problems. As Curly's popularity grew, so did his insecurities. Despite the laughter he generated on screen, he felt deeply self-conscious about his shaved head. In his mind, losing his hair had stripped away any sense of masculinity or attractiveness. Larry Fine once mentioned that Curly almost always wore a hat when he went out in public. It wasn't just a fashion choice. Without it, Curly felt exposed, almost like a child rather than a grown man. To cope with those feelings, he began drinking heavily. Money created another challenge. Curly had little interest in saving or planning for the future. When a paycheck arrived, it rarely stayed in his pocket for long. He spent freely on whatever caught his attention: expensive houses, flashy cars, lavish gifts, and an endless stream of dogs. He adored animals and often surrounded himself with them. Because Curly struggled with financial discipline, Mo eventually stepped in to manage many aspects of his life. The older brother handled business matters, helped organize Curly's finances, and even assisted with filing taxes. But money wasn't Curly's greatest weakness. Women were. He craved companionship, but rarely seemed able to maintain a stable relationship. Friends often noticed that he was painfully shy around women. Instead of approaching someone himself, he tended to connect with whoever approached him first. Unfortunately, those encounters didn't always lead to healthy relationships. People who knew him personally believed Curly wasn't chasing romance for shallow reasons. According to those close to him, he simply disliked being alone. Having someone around made him feel calmer and less restless. Dolly Sallin, a friend of the family, remembered that Curly constantly sought company. If there was a woman in his life, he was more likely to stay home and relax, rather than wander restlessly from place to place. Without that companionship, he seemed unable to sit still. By 1945, director and producer Norman Maurer had noticed a clear pattern in Curly's behavior. Curly could be extremely trusting, especially when it came to attractive women. If someone charmed him with the right story, he was capable of making life-changing decisions almost instantly. The same impulsiveness extended beyond relationships. Real estate agents could convince him to sell one home and buy another with very little persuasion. Friends joked that every few weeks, Curly seemed to have a new girlfriend, a new car, a new house, and often a new dog. His personal life soon became just as chaotic as the comedy routines audiences loved on screen. After his first youthful marriage had been annulled years earlier, Curly eventually married again. His second marriage came on June 7, 1937, when he wed Elaine Ackerman. The following year, the couple welcomed a daughter named Marilyn. But the demands of Curly's career quickly created distance within the family. Filming schedules, touring performances, and constant travel left little time for domestic life. Even when Curly wasn't working, he often preferred going out on his own, rather than settling into a routine at home. Elaine later admitted that she never truly got to know her husband very well. Their differences extended beyond lifestyle. Elaine came from a college-educated background, while Curly had never finished high school. Both families also carried reservations about the marriage. Curly's mother remained a powerful influence in his life, and her presence complicated many of his relationships. Elaine reportedly described her mother-in-law as distant and cold. By June of 1940, the marriage reached its breaking point. Elaine filed for divorce, and newspaper reports at the time included serious accusations, including claims of physical abuse and infidelity. Curly's later biographies offered a more complicated picture, but the marriage was clearly falling apart. In the years that followed, Curly leaned heavily into a fast-paced lifestyle. He ate excessively, drank frequently, and partied often. The toll on his body became impossible to ignore. His weight increased dramatically, and his blood pressure climbed to dangerous levels. In January 1945, his health crisis reached a serious point. Curly was admitted to Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara, where doctors diagnosed him with severe hypertension, obesity, and a retinal hemorrhage. He remained under medical care for several weeks before finally being discharged in early February. Only 8 months later, Curly found himself in New York for a personal appearance. During that trip, he met Marion Buxbaum, a petite blonde woman with a 10-year-old son. Curly was immediately captivated. Within weeks, he was deeply involved in the relationship. On October 17, 1945, the two were married in New York. Friends and family soon began to worry. Curly showered Marion with expensive gifts, fur coats, jewelry, and countless luxuries. He even purchased a new home for her in Toluca Lake. People close to him suspected that Marion's interest had less to do with love and more to do with his growing fortune. Their marriage quickly deteriorated. After only 3 months filled with arguments and accusations, the couple separated in January 1946. Curly filed for divorce, and the situation exploded into a public scandal. Newspapers covered the dispute heavily, turning the breakup into headline material. According to friends, the legal battle became extremely ugly. Marion reportedly attempted to claim a large portion of Curly's money and made humiliating accusations about his personal habits, claims that those who knew him insisted were completely untrue. The marriage lasted less than 9 months. By July 22, 1946, the divorce was finalized. By that point, Curly had endured 3 failed marriages, leaving many people wondering why his relationships never seemed to last. Some observers believed the problem was simple immaturity. Others suggested that many of the women in his life were attracted more to his fame than to the man himself. There was also another possibility. Those who truly knew Curly often described him as a sweet and generous person who struggled with deep restlessness. He seemed constantly anxious, always searching for something to quiet the feeling inside him. For Curly, relationships were rarely just about romance. They were an attempt to find peace. Tom Curly, Howard Mystery, finally solved, and it's heartbreaking. Not long after Curly's turbulent split from Marion Buxbaum, it became clear that something much more serious was happening behind the scenes. His health, which had already been fragile for years, began deteriorating rapidly. At first, the signs were subtle. On set, he started forgetting his lines. Cues that once came naturally suddenly slipped past him. The energetic comedian who had once dominated every scene now looked exhausted, drained by a constant fatigue he couldn't shake. Eventually, he went to see a doctor in 1945. The diagnosis painted a troubling picture. Curly was suffering from dangerously high blood pressure, retinal hemorrhages, and a number of other medical issues that suggested his body had been under enormous strain for a long time. But the truth was, those conditions were only part of the story. The environment the Three Stooges worked in during their prime was anything but gentle. In those days, film sets didn't operate with the kind of safety precautions audiences might expect today. The Stooges built their act on intense slapstick, head smacks, falls, crashes, and physical gags that looked painful because quite often they were. Curly, in particular, absorbed a large number of blows to the head throughout his career. Over time, those repeated hits contributed to serious internal damage, including brain hemorrhages that left his health hanging by a thread. Looking back years later, Curly's niece, who was also Moe's daughter, offered some revealing insight into why he didn't seek help earlier. She explained that Curly approached life with the mindset of a child. If Moe didn't specifically tell him to do something, it simply didn't happen. In her view, Curly had always depended on his older brother to guide him. Children, after all, don't schedule their own doctor's appointments. She even wondered whether Moe's fierce protectiveness may have unintentionally encouraged that dependence. Still, she never questioned Moe's love for his younger brother. To Moe, Curly wasn't just family. He was someone he watched over almost like a son. Understanding what happened next also requires understanding the man who ran Columbia Pictures at the time, producer Harry Cohn. Cohn had a reputation that stretched far beyond Hollywood studios. He was widely known as a tough, often ruthless boss who demanded results above everything else. One famous story about his funeral captures how many people viewed him. Thousands attended the service, and a comedian in the crowd reportedly joked that the massive turnout simply proved a familiar truth. Give the public something they want to see, and they'll show up. Whether the line was truly directed at Cohn or not, the fact that people believed it tells you everything about the man's reputation. That harsh leadership style became painfully clear when Curly's health began collapsing. Around this time, Curly suffered his first stroke, coming shortly after the emotional stress of his bitter divorce. Naturally, Moe approached Cohn and asked if Curly could take time off to recover properly. Cohn refused. The studio had a contract to fulfill, and in his mind, that contract mattered more than anything else. Columbia needed its short films delivered on schedule. So, incredibly, Curly was pushed back onto the set only about a month after suffering a major stroke. Fortunately, Curly wasn't facing that pressure alone. The people working closest with him tried their best to shield him from the strain. Moe and Larry stepped in wherever they could, taking on additional dialogue and handling more of the physical gags so Curly could rest between scenes. Directors also began quietly recycling older footage whenever possible, inserting previously filmed material to reduce the number of new scenes Curly had to perform. Even with those adjustments, the difference was obvious. Anyone watching the final shorts Curly filmed during that period can see the change. The explosive energy that once defined him had faded. In its place was a performer who looked tired, slower, and increasingly fragile. Then came the moment that changed everything. On May 6, 1946, the Stooges were filming what would become their 97th short film, Half-Wit's Holiday. The production was nearing the end of the day, and the crew was preparing to shoot the final scene. When someone called for Curly, there was no response. Moe went looking for his brother and quickly found him nearby. The moment he saw Curly's face, he knew something was terribly wrong. Curly tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. One side of his mouth had collapsed, and tears were streaming down his face. In that instant, Moe realized Curly had suffered another stroke. The moment devastated him, but the reality of filmmaking was relentless. Once Curly was taken care of, Moe had to return to the set and step into the scene himself so the production could be completed. Curly's career as an active member of the Three Stooges had effectively ended that day. With Curly no longer able to perform, the group faced a difficult decision. Moe reached out to his older brother Shemp, who had once been part of the act years earlier. At the time, Shemp had built a comfortable solo career and wasn't particularly eager to return. But he also understood the situation. If he didn't step in, Moe and Larry would likely lose their positions at Columbia. Out of loyalty to his brothers, Shemp agreed to return to the Stooges, though he made it clear the arrangement was only temporary, lasting until Curly recovered. For a brief time, it seemed possible that Curly might improve. About a year after the stroke, his condition appeared to stabilize slightly. During this period, he met a widow named Valerie Newman, a woman who would soon become one of the most important people in his life. Valerie was 32 years old and had been married 3 times before, but unlike many others in Curly's past, she seemed genuinely devoted to him. The two married on July 31, 1947. Valerie quickly became Curly's primary caregiver, dedicating herself almost entirely to looking after him as his health continued to decline. Despite the difficulties they faced, the couple welcomed a daughter together named Janie. Friends later remembered Valerie as a constant presence during Curly's most difficult years, caring for him around the clock with remarkable patience and compassion. By 1949, however, Curly's condition took another devastating turn. He suffered a second major stroke and was rushed to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Hollywood. The stroke left him partially paralyzed, and doctors briefly considered performing spinal surgery in an attempt to improve his condition. Ultimately, they decided the risks were too great. Curly was now confined to a wheelchair. Doctors placed him on a strict diet of boiled rice and apples in an effort to reduce his weight and bring his blood pressure under control. The plan worked, but perhaps too well. His weight dropped dramatically, leaving him frail and weak. Those who visited him during this period struggled to recognize the man they once knew. One friend later remembered watching Curly's hand slowly slide off the armrest of his wheelchair, unable to lift it back up without assistance because of the paralysis and weakness. As his condition worsened, Valerie eventually made the difficult decision to admit him to the Motion Picture Country House and Hospital in Woodland Hills in August of 1950. He spent several months there, undergoing treatments and medical evaluations, before returning home that November. But the hospital visits didn't end there. Over the next 2 years, Curly moved in and out of medical facilities as doctors continued trying to manage his declining health. When he returned home, he was mostly bedridden, relying heavily on Valerie's care. By early 1951, the situation had grown so difficult that Valerie needed help from a full-time nurse. Later that month, Curly was moved into a nursing home called Colonial House in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, his health continued to spiral downward. In March, he suffered yet another stroke. Mo soon discovered that the facility didn't meet proper fire safety codes and immediately arranged to move his brother again. In April 1951, Curly was transferred to the North Hollywood Hospital and Sanitarium, where he remained for the rest of the year. But by December, the hospital supervisor delivered troubling news. Curly's mental condition had deteriorated to the point where the staff struggled to care for him. They even suggested transferring him to a psychiatric institution. Mo refused outright. He would not allow his brother to be placed in a mental hospital. The final move came on January 7, 1952. Mo was in the middle of filming another Three Stooges short when he received the call. He left the set immediately and helped arrange Curly's transfer to Baldy View Sanitarium in San Gabriel. Just 11 days later, on January 18th, Curly Howard passed away. He was only 48 years old.